Homegirl been in that hair salon for about 16 chapters now. Ah, I get it. This is that book you read while you're waiting to get your hair did. Ha, right. I got it. Welcome to the Black Curriculum. I gotta admit that I'm really glad to share this video with you guys, and I'm really thankful that one of my friends recommended this book to me. I got a lot to say after reading it, so let's get right into Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. From Lagos, Nigeria to Philly to the Bronx, in some way, Ifemelu is every black woman. Yes, every black woman. You might think upon the first read that it's just about her and Obenze, but it's way more than that. To me, this story is about learning and unlearning. And I love how we get to walk with her on her journey as she re-examines her identity, her blackness, and love through all different angles. Ooh, almost forgot my mug. I am bugging. There we go. So I'll address some of the topics in this video by sharing a few quotes from her blog. Man, that blog had me all up in my feelings. So at my job, I had the privilege of leading a book discussion, and here were one of my questions. Ifemelu's blog grows a huge following in a short amount of time. She critiques on American norms and her experiences in America. As a reader, would you consider her blog to be a source of validity or skepticism? Or both? You see, the root of my question is getting to the theme of identity. We see loads of circumstances in the book when Ifemelu, Obenze, and Auntie Uju struggle with their identity. We notice how Ifemelu chose to adapt an American accent after a white girl at a registration office mistook her for someone who couldn't speak English. We saw how Obenze struggled with identity when he lived in London. Man, he even got some name off of some shady guy who capitalized off of his desperation to stay in London. But I don't want to focus on those moments in particular. I'd rather highlight the overarching theme of her blog that we read throughout the book. So again, my question, is her blog a source of validity or skepticism? Or both? I mean, at the end of the day, she, being a Nigerian, is critiquing and speaking on a culture that she is not particularly from. Is this valid? My answer used to be, nah. Are you bugging? Like, how is she gonna come over to my country and start trashing my culture? But then I kept reading. I noticed that her experiences started to overlap with mine. She began to feel the same push towards the margin, the same pull towards assimilation to white standards of style and speech, and the same run-ins with white Americans who feel like they got race all figured out. Although Ifemelu's nationality differs from mine, her being Nigerian, I would say that our blackness is what brought us together. It is because of these shared experiences that bring us together so that we can examine these differences, these beautiful differences. And that leads me to my next point. The differences between Nigerians and African Americans. And I'll speak mostly from the African American standpoint because, duh. Now, one of us is a child of the African diaspora and the other is not. So what are the implications of that? Well, if you're a child of the African diaspora, like myself, it means that you're inevitably linked to the transatlantic slave trade. It also means that you'll find it a lot harder to retrace your ancestral steps because slavery. And in my honest opinion, to be African American is to answer the call to be exceptional in a country that really ain't trying to welcome you there in the first place. To be African American is also to recognize that the word black is more than just naming a group of people who share the same melanin count as you do. The word black is linguistic, political, and self-affirming. To be African American is to be part of a culture that has circled the globe 100-fold with regards to music, style, vernacular, creativity, and innovation. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, get to the Nigerian part. Well, that's for you to find out because you're the one that got to read this book. Now let me be clear what I'm saying this now. I'm not shaming Nigerian culture. I'm just letting y'all know what it's like to be black, grow up black in America, as opposed to growing up black in Nigeria. So now let's talk about how African Americans view race versus how it seemed Nigerians viewed race. Here's a quote from one of her blogs. They tell us race is an invention, that there is more genetic variation between two black people than there is between a black person and a white person. Then they tell us black people have a worse kind of breast cancer and get more fibroids, and white folk get cystic fibrosis and osteoporosis. So what's the deal, doctors in the house? Is race an invention or not? From what I gathered in Americanah, it seemed like initially Ifemelu's view on race was just something that black folk harped about in the United States. And that's truly a shame on many levels, especially since that's the narrative that a lot of white America adapts. The irony is that black folk did not create race, but I will tell you who created racism. It's the same folks that created Jim Crow laws. It's the same folks that created the Ku Klux Klan. It's the same folks that created the war on drugs. It's the same folks that created the word nigger. And white America knows racism very well because, well, they invented it. Black America, well, we carry the burden of racism. As I come to the end of this video, I realize that there are a lot of themes that I can easily dissect and make a video all within themselves, but I chose the most themes that stuck out to me, and so I want to end by addressing traveling while black. And so Ifemelu wrote a blog piece on traveling while black, and I'll read a piece to you. Let traveling black folk know what the deal is. It's not like anybody's going to shoot you, but it's great to know where to expect that people will stare at you. In the German Black Forest, it's pretty hostile staring. In Tokyo and Istanbul, everyone is cool and indifferent. In Shanghai, the staring was intense, and in Delhi, it was nasty. I thought, hey, aren't we kind of in this together? You know, people of color and all. I'd be reading that Brazil is the race mecca, and I go to Rio and nobody looks like me in the nice restaurants and nice hotels. People act funny when I'm walking to the first class line at the airport. Kind of nice funny, like you're making a mistake. You can't look like that and fly first class. I go to Mexico and they're staring at me. It's not hostile at all, but it just makes you know you stick out. Kind of like they like you, but you're still King Kong. Could it have been her hair, the way she spoke, the way she carried herself? I mean, who knows? But I think what's most important when you're reading Americanah is that you will find yourself in one or two or three or nearly all of those experiences. And that's why I say at the beginning of the video that in some way she is every black woman. Every black woman. You know what, reading Americanah to me sort of reminded me of getting a hold of someone's journal for the first time when they're going abroad. And similar to her experiences, my first experience abroad was in Leicester, England. And I kept a journal at that time. And the funny thing is when me being African American, went to England, I was known as the American boy, not so much the black boy, because of course there are black people in England as well. So that whole idea of reclaiming my identity and looking at my own blackness from a different perspective really added a lot of truth and conviction in my experiences living in England, living in South Korea, and now living in Bogota, Colombia. And after reading Americanah, this is definitely not going to be the last book I read from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This has been The Black Curriculum.